This is Marcy with Paragon Testing. Can you hear me? I'm going to wait to hear back from someone so I know that you can hear me. Please send us a chat. Excellent. How is the sound quality? Is it clear? Is it popping? Okay, excellent. Wonderful. Okay, so we're going to get started. I'm going to be spending the next 60 to 75 minutes with you. And what we're doing today is learning all about the CAEL CE. And I'm hoping that you all know what the CAEL CE is all about. And let me explain what we're going to be doing. Oh, before I do that, I want to draw your attention to the orange arrow, which is somewhere near the top of your screen, probably on the right. So I see most of you have figured out to click on that arrow so that you can access the questions box. If you haven't already done so, please experiment with that. You'll notice that that box will close after a while, so whenever you want to send a question or a comment, please just click on that arrow again if you need to, and then you'll be able to send us a chat message, okay? And I do encourage questions and comments. They are very welcome throughout the session. Also, I want to let you know that today I'm working with my colleague Katrina, and she's sitting here with me right now, and together we will be trying to answer your questions. So Katrina will be answering a lot of questions by typing, and I'll be answering other questions verbally so you can all hear the answers, okay? All right, so the length of our session today depends in part on you and how many questions you have. So we will probably spend a solid hour and possibly a bit longer together. So I'm going to start by telling you a bit about the background of the CAEL CE. I'm going to explain who uses the test results, but where we're going to spend most of our time is in section 3 here on test format and scoring. So I'm going to explain the structure of the test. I have a lot of slides prepared for you to show you all the different parts of the test and explain how each of the skills is approached through the test. Also during this time, we will touch briefly on skills and strategies for each of the 4 test parts, or not, sorry, not the test parts, but the 4 skills that are assessed in the CAEL CE. And we'll wrap up at the end with a quick look at our study materials. If I haven't answered all your questions, hopefully there will be time at the end to deal with those. All right, so I'm hoping that you're all familiar with the CAEL. Have any of you taken the CAEL assessment? You can use that question box to let me know. But I'm wondering if you know exactly what the CAEL CE is. So maybe somebody out there can guess, or maybe you actually know what those letters CE stand for. You can see that CAEL stands for Canadian Academic English Language. What's C and E for? So I think maybe you need some help. Oh, thank you, Pam. You're exactly right. So it is indeed the computer edition of the CAEL test. So I'm not sure if you're aware that the CAEL has been, or the original CAEL assessment has been around for about maybe 20 years. It was originally developed in Canada at Carleton University, and Paragon Testing acquired this test a few years ago. So we have been delivering the original paper version, but in the meantime, we've also been working on developing this new computer edition of the CAEL test, and that's what this session today is all about. So the CAEL CE CE, just like the CAEL, is a Canadian test of academic English, and it's integrated in both skills and topic. And I'll explain more about that as we go. Now, we really believe that this test is quite a realistic assessment of language use in Canadian universities and colleges. I'm going to say more about that in the next slide or two. And it is 100% computer delivered. So unlike the current version of the CAEL, when you go in to test with the CAEL CE, you'll sit down at a computer and then you can just stay there until you're done at the end of the test. So you don't have to get up and go somewhere else for part of the test. Now, I mentioned that this test really does provide a good assessment of using English in a Canadian academic setting. And the reason we can say that is that this test really assesses your ability to participate in different types of core academic activities, different types of academic activities. And we've divided them into core and supporting types. So for the core academic activities, you would be doing activities on the test that are very similar to what you would be doing when you listen to a lecture, when you participate in a lab, when you write an essay, and other classroom or homework activities. Now, we also have things that relate to supporting academic activities, such as being part of a study group and discussing things with your group members. Having a meeting with your advisor, maybe explaining something to an instructor, and so on. So all of these types of activities are included in the test, and in this way, it really allows us to assess how successful you as a test taker would be in a first-year college or university classroom. And as with all our tests, we're proud to state that the CAEL CE is developed in Canada by Canadians. Okay, so I wanted to give you a little more information about this. So I went to our CAEL CE testing office right here in our head office in Vancouver, and I asked them to answer this question: what does the CAEL CE assess? And so I've put that in this big talking box here, and I'll read it out with you. So the CAEL CE assesses the ability to use English as it is used in Canadian universities and colleges. It allows test takers to experience what it is like to participate in a Canadian post-secondary classroom. And that's a really important point. So as you sit the CAEL CE test, you're really going to get an understanding of the kinds of things you'll be expected to do in your first year classes. And if you succeed in the test, it means that you should also succeed in those classes, at least in terms of your English ability. I can't speak about your skills in different academic areas. So let's briefly, for those of you who are familiar with the CAEL assessment, which is the original one, let's briefly have a look at what the similarities and differences are between the original CAEL and the CAEL CE. So the main differences are in this kind of red-orange color at the top of this chart. Now the CAEL, the original CAEL is of course still available now, and we will continue to run the CAEL for another 6 to 12 months and quite possibly longer, and we'll certainly give a lot of advance notice if and when we decide that it's time to close that down. Now the CAEL CE is just starting up. Our first test sittings will be on September 15th, and they will be held in Toronto and Vancouver. And then in October, we'll open it up in a few more locations, and so on and so on. So hopefully by January, it will be readily accessible across the country. Now, the original CAEL test is Well, it's primarily a paper test, but the speaking portion is done on the computer, and there is a break before speaking, and you get up and you move around to another area. Whereas the CAEL CE is 100% computer delivered, as I've mentioned a few times now, and we'll keep coming back to that. Now, here's an interesting difference. The original CAEL is one topic only. So the entire test focuses on whatever the topic is that is introduced at the very beginning. And you have some readings and a lecture and an essay, and they are all on that topic. Now, this is very convenient if it is a topic that you're comfortable with and familiar with, and you have a lot of vocabulary related to that topic. However, if it is a topic that you're really uncomfortable with, then you're out of luck with the CAEL, because you don't get a choice of topics. You have to deal with the topic you're given. Now, compare that to the CAEL CE, and in this new version of the CAEL, we are including 4 topics in every test. So when you come in and write the test, you will have 4 different topics over the course of the entire test. Now, each of those topics are given in that integrated test format, just as we have in the original CAEL. And what that means is that you will have reading and listening and then speaking or writing tasks that are all on the same topic. So you'll learn about the topic through the reading and the lectures, and then you will do some speaking or some writing about the same topic, just as you would do in a real classroom. So the other 3 points here are all the same for both tests. Both tests will indicate how successful you can be in your first year of post-secondary studies. And then both tests provide you with scores for each of the skills. So you get a separate score for listening, reading, writing, and speaking, as well as an overall band score. And the scores are exactly the same, 0 to 90 for the new test and the original test. And we offer free online tests for both of these. Okay, so if you are a test taker and you're thinking you're going to be taking the CAEL CE, I want to give you a very quick peek at what your test room could look like. So these pictures are taken at our head office in Vancouver. So this is our new state-of-the-art test center. Now, on the left side, you can see what your individual workspace could look like, and you see that you've got great equipment there. You have a fair bit of privacy, but the wall ends and then there's somebody sitting probably on either side of you. And you can see this is just a partial view of the room. There are more rows of test takers here. Now the lady in the middle, she's not how our average test taker looks. She's a little too happy and relaxed looking for that. However, I did want you to have a look at the headset and be aware that this headset will help to block out the noise of the other test takers around you. And of course, you will be speaking into a microphone. So be aware that you'll be surrounded by people. Now, you'll soon see the order of the skills, the way they're presented in the test, and you'll see that at the beginning everyone's going to be talking at the same time because the test begins with speaking, but after that people are going to be working at their own pace, and it's possible that different people will be speaking while others are doing something else, and you'll see that in a minute. Okay, so I'm not sure how many of you have done a computer-delivered language skills test, but there are a lot of benefits. So if you're choosing between, let's say, CAEL CE and IELTS Academic, then this might interest you because IELTS is still a paper test. So when you're doing a computer-delivered test, everything happens in one sitting. You do not have to come back later that day or the next day for a private interview interview. Also, the computerized test, or at least our test, offers some wonderful timer devices like countdown timers and timer bars, as well as a summary of how much time you have for this section you're working in. So these help you to manage your time effectively, which I strongly believe allows you to relax a bit and perhaps perform a little better on the test. Now, in terms of speaking, it's pretty wonderful that you don't have to worry about making eye contact with your examiner. You don't have to wonder what you should be doing with your hands and your arms. And even better, you don't have to watch the examiner make notes about what you're saying and wonder what they're writing. So I believe that while in some ways people find it a little more stressful to do a speaking test on a computer, in other ways it really reduces a whole other set of stresses. So it seems that a lot of people are finding the speaking test on the computer to be quite agreeable. Now for listening, you're wearing a headset with a volume control, so you can just raise or lower that volume however you need to. For reading, you're able to look at the reading passage on the left side and your work area on the right side. You don't need to flip around with two different booklets and match up part of the text on one page with questions in the booklet on some other page, and in that way it's a lot easier to manage physically. And finally, in terms of writing, well, you're provided with some really good editing functions, just the very basic ones like cut and paste and copy and delete, I believe, and maybe undo and redo. And you also have an automatic word count function, so you don't have to wonder how many words you've got and are you within that, that frame that you've been given. Any questions so far? Is everybody with me? Well, I hope so. I hope you can all still hear me. Excellent. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, so CAEL CE is a new test, and we've been working very hard at going around the country and talking to lots of colleges and universities. There has been a tremendous response, and we've had a great deal of interest in all of these universities taking the test on. So on screen now you can see a list of quite a few of the bigger ones, and I'm excited to tell you that we now have over 100 institutions in Canada that are accepting the CAEL CE. And if you would like to go to this page here, this web page, you'll be able to view a full list province by province. Also, be aware, if you're thinking of being an immigration consultant, that the test is accepted by the Immigration Consultants of Canada Regulatory Council, or the ICCRC. Okay, so this brings us to the main part of the test. Sorry, just had to have a sip of tea there. So not the main part of the test, but this brings us to the main part of our presentation today. So how many of you have been online and have looked at our free sample test for the CAEL CE? I'm guessing that some of you have done that. And yeah, and if you have, that's fine. And if you haven't, I'm going to fill you in now on exactly how the test is organized. So now there are 5 parts to the test. So we start with the first part, which is simply speaking. And this is the only part of the test which deals with only one skill. So the remaining parts are going to integrate different skills. So in part 2, you're going to have some reading tasks, and then you're going to speak about the topic that was introduced in those reading passages. So that will be your first topic. In part 3, you will have a few listening parts, and then you're going to have a speaking task about a lecture. And this will be on a different topic than you had in part 2 when you were doing the reading. Now, when we move to part 4, then we're dealing with entirely academic readings and lectures. So there might have been some more informal types of reading passages and listening passages in parts 2 and 3, but in part 4 they're 100% academic in nature. So it wouldn't be something informal like a teacher talking to the class, not about the subject, but about, let's say, maybe an assignment. So in parts 4 and 5, that won't happen. You'll have either formal lectures or formal readings. Now in part 4, you'll have a long reading passage, a lecture, and then a long writing task. And in part 5, you're going to have a long reading again and another lecture and a shorter writing task. So for parts 2, 3, 4, and 5, you'll be dealing with different topics in each one. And you can see in the bottom here that each topic is taken from one faculty, and that faculty is going to be either arts or science. And I can hear lots of questions about that. So I prepared a slide for you to give you a little more info. So for each of these faculties, we've got dozens and dozens of subjects, and I've put some sample subjects up on screen for you. These are probably the more common ones. And each topic on your test will be taken from one of these subjects. So in art, some possible subjects could be anthropology, business, communications, criminology, economics, education, linguistics, music, political science, and many, many more. In science, you'd be looking at things like biology, botany, chemistry, cognitive science, ecology, forestry, health sciences and nutrition, physics, and again, that's just the beginning. There's many more than that. So if you are in, let's say you're an arts major or you're planning to be an arts major, you don't have to worry that you're only going to be dealing with science topics. You can see that the topics will be drawn from both faculties, and there will be at least one and possibly two from each of the faculties. Does that make sense to everyone? So looking at this in a little more detail, let's find out what you're doing in each of the 5 parts, and then I'm actually going to show you test questions. So in part 1, you have 3 different speaking tasks. Now the first 2 are what we call independent because they don't relate to anything that you're going to read or hear. So in other words, you're going to be talking about yourself or where the country that you're from, or something related to your academic studies. I think those are where most of the topics will be drawn from. Now in part 3, you'll be moving into an academic task as you look at some kind of a graph and talk about it. So all of these 3 tasks will take place in 7 to 10 minutes. From there, you'll move into part 2, where you will be doing 3 different things, so or maybe even more. So you're going to have at least 1 short reading passage, then you'll have at least 1 long reading passage on the same topic, of course, and once those 2 are done, well, you will be completing questions as well. So after each passage, you'll have some questions. Usually for the short reading passage, it's about 3 questions. For the long one, it's about 11. So you're going to have at least 14 and possibly as many as 25 questions if you have another one of either of these. Now, your total time, including all of the readings, the questions, and your speaking task, will range from 35 to 50 minutes for part 2. Okay, so from there you move to part 3, and this time it's an integrated listening section. So you'll be replacing those reading passages with listening passages, so and in a very similar pattern. So you're going to have at least 1 short listening passage, which will have at least 3 questions. Then you'll have at least 1 long lecture, which will have a minimum of 11 questions. And and they'll be on the same topic, and then you will finally get a speaking question about the lecture. And this section will take you 25 to 35 minutes to complete. Okay, from there we move into the 2 academic units, and this is where you're only dealing with lectures and academic readings. And we're also moving into where the writing parts of the test finally come up. So in part 4, you're going to have a long reading passage, then you'll have a short lecture on that topic, and you'll have a long writing response. And this is going to be very much like an essay. Now, for each of the reading and the lecture, you'll have 11 to 15 questions, and you will have a total of 60 to 70 minutes for this section, and that includes 35 minutes for the essay or the long writing. And I'll show you all the details on that as we work through the slides. So finally, you get to part 5, and here again you have a long reading and a short lecture, same number of questions, and then you have a short writing response here. This one is very much like a summary, and I believe that it is 10 to 15 minutes, if I remembered right. Let me see. Can everybody hear me? We're just getting a note that one person is unable to hear me. Oh, thank you. Jennifer, are you able to hear me again? Everyone else can hear me fine. Oh, thanks, Juliana. Okay. I'll let you see if Jennifer's okay. All right, so moving on, before we get to looking at actual test questions, let's just get a grip on how many tasks we're going to be doing throughout the test. So if we look at the whole test, and by the way, I don't think I mentioned, but you probably saw, the total test time is about 3 hours and 30 minutes, okay? So you want to make sure that you get to the washroom before the test begins. Okay, so there's going to be a total of 5 speaking tasks throughout the test, and they all take place in the first 3 sections. For reading, there's going to be 4 to 5 passages, and they will occur throughout the test. For listening, they're also peppered throughout the test, and you're again going to have 4 to 5 lectures and listenings. And then the 2 writing tasks are in the last 2 parts of the test. Okay. Now, we're finally moving in to look at the speaking tasks. So you can see the same chart I showed you earlier, and this time I've put the speaking tasks in blue for you. And what we're going to do is look at each one of these. So I'll show you all of part 1, and then I'll show you the 1 speaking part each in part 2 and part 3. Okay? Now, I first want to draw your attention to our timing devices. So while you're doing the speaking test, you're going to be having preparation time and recording time. And I wanted you to just have a peek at what those timers look like. So the preparation time is a countdown timer. And you can see in this one on the left that there are 19 seconds left. And the recording time is given as a timer bar. So in this example, this test taker looks like they're about, I'd say about 30% through the test. All right, so we're now moving on finally to the first speaking task, and you'll see that the instructions page is quite similar for many of the tasks. So I'll read this one for you. Your professor asks you a question. You have 30 seconds to prepare and 60 seconds to answer the question. Your preparation time starts on the next page. So as soon as you click this next button, your 30 seconds are going to start clicking down, and that's why you want to be sure you're ready to go before you click the next button. And remember, once you click next, you can never go back. You can only move forwards in the test. Now, when you're on your task screen, you're always going to have your preparation time and speaking time summarized for you at the top of the test screen, as well as the next button. Don't click that next button until you're done. And in fact, when your speaking time is up, I believe the test will automatically move you to the next page anyway. Okay, so you get more information on the left side about what you need to do, and you can see that the actual speaking task question is on the right. So this screen is going to be similar again in many of the questions. And you'll see that you're asked, so these are both very important points. Give details and examples to support your response. So you're expected to develop your response with good supporting information. And you're also told that you will be evaluated on the content of your response and the accuracy of your language. So you want to think about, in terms of content, what kinds of ideas have you come up with, and do you have good support for each of them? Have you organized them well? And in terms of accuracy of your language, well, this will refer to grammar, sentence structure, as well as vocabulary, of course. So you want to be able to choose words and phrases that are relevant to the topic. So you can see that the first question is very basic. What do you want to study at university and why? The preparation timer is counting down. You have 17 seconds left, and when it hits 0, then your speaking time will begin. I believe you'll hear a prompt telling you to begin speaking, and try to fill that time and complete your response before the time is up. Okay, so this is the second speaking question, and as I mentioned, the instructions are very similar. The only difference here is that you now have more time. So you have 1 minute to prepare and 1 minute and 30 seconds to answer the question. Now, you're now on the second independent speaking task, and because you have more time both to prepare and speak, you're going to be expected to give a strong, more developed answer. So let's have a look at what the question is. So the question says, in your opinion, what are some of the strengths of high school education in your home country? So you're going to have a minute to think about this. You're going to be provided as well with paper and a pen or a pencil. So I strongly recommend that you use your preparation time to write down some ideas, maybe cross out ideas that you think aren't strong enough, maybe write down some words or phrases that you think would be especially useful, and that's probably all you're going to have time to do, if that. And then you're going to go on to your recording time. So otherwise, everything here on the page is what you saw for question 1. Okay, Pam, can you hear me now? And can others hear me? I'm hoping you can. Thank you. All right, I will keep going. If individuals are having problems at your end hearing, I strongly recommend that you exit the session and come back in using a different browser. That may solve the problem, okay? Okay, so we're now moving on to the third speaking task. So this is the end of part 1. And here's where things begin to get academic. So you're going to be asked to speak on a graph. And you can see that this one looks a little different, the instructions page does. So your professor shows you an image. Describe and explain what you see. Now, this part has changed as well. So the first 2 parts are the same. You'll be evaluated on the content of your response, the accuracy of your language, and your ability to reference details in the image. I'll show you what that means in a minute. So just like you had for the previous task, this time you also have 1 minute to prepare and 2 minutes to respond. So let's move on and see what this is about. Okay. So this time all the information you need is on the left side. You're told to answer the question by speaking into the mic. This chart shows non-resident travelers to Canada. So you have a look at the chart. Remember, your preparation time is counting down, so you're working fast. Describe and explain the information you see depicted in the graph. What conclusions can you draw? So you are going to have a full 2 minutes to speak for this, and you have a lot of things to consider. Now, make sure that you understand what this chart is telling you. So if you during your preparation time, you say, okay, non-resident travelers to Canada. Oh, that must mean like maybe tourists and people coming to Canada to do business. So I can talk about those kinds of people. These aren't like Canadian citizens and residents. What do these lines mean? The big orange one, people who come here by plane. The blue one, people who drive here or take the train. So they must be coming from the States maybe, or somewhere they can reach that way. And then this one at the bottom, this dotted line, by sea. So that would be people coming by boat. So you look at the years, you go, oh, so this shows me this time span of 2013 to 2016, and this shows me the number of residents. And then you look at the trends and you look at what's going on and think about how you can describe that and what conclusions can you draw. So this is something you're going to want to practice and get good at doing, so that when you go into the official test sitting, you feel confident and you know how to deal with graphs. Okay, so we're moving on now to speaking part 2. So actually we have completed all of part 1 of the test. Remember, part 1 is all speaking. So now we're moving on to part 2. And by the time you get to this speaking task, you will have completed 2 readings. Remember, you start with a short reading and then you have a longer reading. And after the longer reading, you reach a speaking question, and by this time you've learned a lot about the topic, and you're going to be able to incorporate a lot of that knowledge as you speak. So here you're told that your professor asks you a question about the reading, and again you have 1 minute of prep time, 2 minutes of speaking time. Okay, let's have a look. Oh, there are 2 tabs here, and your question is on the right. Why do engineering disasters happen? What are the causes of errors? So there are 2 parts to the question. Now there's 4 points here in your instructions. Well, the first thing you learn is you can click on this reading passage tab to go back to the reading that you already completed. Remember, you will have looked at the reading and answered questions. When you do that, you should keep in mind that you're going to have to use some of this information, but you're going to have to rephrase it in your own words, right? Do not copy directly. This is a handy trick here. When you're preparing to speak, and even while you're speaking, you can highlight text in the reading tab, just as you would do it on any computer screen. And be aware what you're evaluated on. So it's the same 2 things at the beginning, content and language, but the third thing is your use of the source material. In other words, you must use the source material. It's critical, and in fact, when you're doing that, as I mentioned already, and I'm going to keep driving this home, don't copy the text from the reading passage. You need to rephrase it in your own words. Okay, so what happens if we click on that reading passage tab? So you are brought back to the reading that you will be familiar with because you will have already completed it earlier, and you'll be able to take your mouse and highlight phrases and pieces of information that you think you can use in your response. Okay. So we have one final speaking part, and that is in part 3. So this time you will have listened to a short listening passage and a lecture, and now you're going to be asked a question about the lecture. You have the same timing, 1 minute of prep time, 2 minutes of speaking time. Okay, so This is a familiar screen. You have your question on the right. So you're asked, what are economic models and how do they help us understand the economy? So you're going to need to give a definition, and then you're going to need to explain how these things are helpful in an economic way. This time, while you can't go back and listen to the lecture, you can certainly look at some lecture notes that we've prepared for you. So I'll show those to you in a minute. But again, you're not going to copy directly from the notes. You're going to rephrase things. And the scoring elements are the same. So let's look at those lecture notes. These notes should summarize the most important points that were presented in the lecture. So hopefully they will help you to remember other information that you'll find useful, or they will at least point you to the main points that you might be able to incorporate into your speaking response. Remember, you have 2 full minutes to fill here. I really recommend that you practice at home by timing yourself and speaking on a variety of topics for 2 minutes. This way you can learn how much effort is required to fill those 2 minutes, and you'll be better equipped to perform well on these questions during the test. Glad to have you back, Pam. Glad that you can hear. So let's summarize a few key things before we move on and out of speaking. So some key speaking skills for you. Try to use appropriate rhythm, pronunciation, and intonation when you're speaking. In other words, make an effort not to speak like this, right? You want to try to vary your voice. Also, minimize pauses, hesitations, and interjections. Now, an interjection is a sound like gee, You've heard me using them from time to time, and it's okay to use all of these things occasionally, but not you don't want to rely on them. Try to make sure you're speaking at a good volume. You don't want to be speaking too fast or too slow, and that covers point 3. Now, start by clearly stating your main idea. Try to incorporate transitions to move from one idea to another. I talked already about using appropriate vocabulary. Remember, most of your speaking responses are going to be academic in nature, so you want to use an academic tone as well. Whenever you're using information from your sources, restate it in your own words. Try to speak in complete sentences, and this probably goes without saying, but do your best to demonstrate good control of grammar and sentence structure. Speaking strategies are fairly simple, and we can break them into 2 categories. So preparation time and recording time. So during your preparation time, you need to read and understand the instructions and questions. Review your sources if you have any. You won't have any for the first 2 in part 1 because you're speaking about yourself or your country or your studies. Brainstorm ideas and select the strongest ones. Write down some key vocabulary or highlight it in the reading. And organize your thoughts and ideas. So this is obviously a lot of things to do. You're not going to necessarily be able to do all of them in your preparation time, but be aware that these are things you could be doing and should be doing as much as possible. During your recording time, begin with a clear opening statement. Make sure you stay on topic. Provide a fully developed response. Speak for the full time, which is going to be hard to do for those 2 minutes, and end with a concluding statement. Okay, so that concludes the speaking part of the presentation, and we're going to move on to the reading tasks in the test. Dariush. Does he want us to say his name? Hi, Dariush. All right. So for the reading tasks, These begin in part 2, and then, so you'll have a few in part 2, one in part 4, and one in part 5. So we're going to look at each one separately now. Are there any questions about speaking before I move on? Okay, so thank you for those who responded. All right, so in part 2, you're going to start with a short reading. This is what the instructions look like. So read the following passage and answer 3 questions. You have 5 minutes and 30 seconds to complete this task. So once you click that next button, your time will begin counting down, and this time includes your reading time as well as answering the questions. So on the left side, you have a fairly informal reading passage, and on the right side, you can see you have your question and answer screens. Now, pay attention up on the right side here. You can see that there are some numbers in squares. These represent the different question screens, and you can move backwards and forwards by using the 2 arrows at the top. During this time, you can see that you have a countdown timer up at top called time remaining, and this only shows minutes. It does not show seconds. So keep your eye on that timer and make sure that when it hits 0, oh, by the way, when it gets to 1 minute, it will then count down in seconds. So make sure that when it gets to 0, all of the questions have been answered. So you can see that this first short reading is going to be something a little bit informal, perhaps. In this case, it's a handout from the teacher explaining how to handle reports. And we now move on to the long reading, which is also in part 2. So for the long reading, you're told that you will have 11 questions and a total of 20 minutes to deal with the reading and the questions. And by the way, I'll be showing you the different question types very, very soon. So for the long reading, typically you're going to find that you have 5 screens, more or less. And remember to use these arrows to click back and forth. As you're answering questions, just click on your chosen answer, and you can change any answers as many times as you want until the time runs out. So we will clearly be... So sorry, I just got distracted a moment. So let's move on and look at what the next reading is. So we have 2 more long readings. One is in part 4, one is in part 5. So they all follow the same pattern. 11 questions, 20 minutes to complete the task. And all these practice screens, by the way, are taken from our free practice test, which is available on our website. And you can see what the different topics are like. So in this case, we have something on the topic of history. And this is a fun answer screen where you will be dragging answers to the appropriate place. But I'll tell you more about that in a moment. Okay, and we will have, so Juan is asked how he can use the highlight function while he's reading. So the answer to that is that when you're actually in the test, and you can experiment with this in our free online sample test, just place your cursor in front of the first word that you want and drag it to the end of the section you would like, and that should highlight it, okay? It might take a bit of practice. Okay. So we're at the final, well, hold on, part 4. Right, so we're now at the final long reading, and again, you can see that we've established a pattern so you'll know what to expect. So here again, you'll have 11 questions, 20 minutes to complete the reading and the task. Now, So here again, you can see that you've got your 5 screens going, and you can see what it looks like when you open up a drop-down menu as well. And this topic is on the solar system. So we're seeing quite a variety of topics here. Okay, so you've had a very quick overview of what the 4 reading sections look like. So what I'd like to do now is summarize for you some skills and strategies. So there are several key reading skills for you to be aware of. So look at the questions as you're in the test and decide, am I going to need to read for general meaning? Do I have to find specific information, or do I need to do some inferring? So if the question is a general meaning question, you will be able to just focus on the broad ideas that are presented, and you won't need to look for a specific phrase or sentence. If it is a specific information question, then you're going to need to identify key information. So you're going to be looking for supporting, you may be looking at supporting details, someone's opinion, looking for a specific example to find the information you need to answer that question. Now, if you're inferring, it's a whole different ball game. Here, you'll need to have a more general understanding and then make your own or draw your own conclusion based on what you learned in the passage. Okay, I'm just moving over to take a question here. Oh, I see what the problem is. Hold on. Everyone just hang on a minute. Yeah. Is there any, so someone has asked, is there any find function that we can use? Mohammed, are you asking if there's some way you can search for a word or a phrase? If you are, the answer is no. Yeah, so there is no find function. It's really up to you to demonstrate your reading ability, okay, by being able to locate information quickly. Okay, we better move on. We still have a lot of ground to cover. So I wanted to show you what our 6 different reading question types are. So you can see the 6 of them listed here, and I'm going to go through each one separately so you know exactly what they look like. Okay, so a multiple choice is a very common question type. In a standard multiple choice question, you only need to choose one answer, okay? So, and you'll see that these always have round circles in them. So you're probably very comfortable with this. Now, multiple choice, multiple answer is a little different. You'll notice that sometimes in the instructions, you're told how many answers to choose. It might be 2 or 3 or 4. So this is one reason why it's so important to read those instructions carefully. Then also notice that these questions have squares instead of circles. So that's another hint. Next, we have fill in the blank. So here you will actually position your cursor in the white rectangle, and then you'll type the answer. And typically the answer is going to be a number or a year or a name or 1 or 2 keywords. And usually the instructions will tell you what you need to look for. Oh, so here's a drop down, and this is what you'll see when there is a blank in the middle of a sentence and you get to choose the answer. So you just click on that little arrow and that will open up your options for you. The next 2 involve moving things around. So in the ordering question type, you're going to put your cursor on each item and move it above or below or in between some other items to put them in the correct order. Now the instructions will tell you what that order needs to be. So again, read those questions carefully. And then finally, matching questions. Here you're going to drag each answer choice into the matching field. Okay, so these are the only types of questions you'll be dealing with on the test. finally, reading strategies can be divided into these 4 categories. So for previewing, whenever you open up a new reading task, you're going to start by previewing. So this is when you very, very quickly consider the format, length, headings, look at the time involved, and decide how you're going to manage your time. Next, you're going to skim the passage to get a very quick understanding of the topic. What are the main ideas? How is the passage structured? And you should be able to do that very quickly in maybe 30 seconds at most. Next, you're going to start looking at those questions and scan, then go back to the text and scan a certain area to try to find the information you need. And then finally, deriving meaning from context, which means if you encounter a word or a phrase that you're not familiar with and you feel like you really need to understand it to answer a question, look at the sentence it's in and see if you can make sense of it. Okay, moving on to listening. So there are 4 listening passages and they occur in parts 3, 4, and 5 of the test. So for part 3, this is a short listening and it will be something a little informal. You're told in the instructions that you'll have 3 questions. Now, be aware that before you hear the listening passage, you'll have 30 seconds to preview the question. So you get a little bit of time to find out what information you're listening for. And after those 30 seconds are up, then the audio will begin to play automatically. Now, you're going to answer the questions as you listen to the lecture. And then when the lecture is over, you will still have 60 seconds left to review the work you've done, make sure everything is answered, and make a few changes if you feel you need to. So here's what the listening sections look like. On the left side, you have a play bar that shows you how much of the audio passage is left. So this one has just started. And on the right, this is the short listening. So you can see all 3 questions here are shown on one page, and you can scroll up and down to access them as needed. Okay, so for the next listening part, this is also in part 3, and this is the lecture. So this time, just as we had in reading, you're going to have 11 questions. But because it's a listening section, first you'll have 2.5 minutes to preview all those 11 questions. Then the lecture will begin. It will play for however long it takes. And when it's done, you still have a full 3 minutes to flip through all of the questions and make sure that you have answered each and every one and perhaps make changes, but only if you think you need to. So you can see that you also have 5 screens here for the long listening, just as we saw in reading. We're at the very beginning of the lecture. And just a quick glance at this question, what do you notice about this multiple choice question? Are you going to be choosing one or more than one answer here? Anybody care to jump in? Of course, if you read the instructions, it tells you that you need to choose 2. And thank you, that's right. So you have to choose 2, and those squares are a really good hint. So as soon as you see those squares, make sure you know how many to choose. So we then hop over to part 4, where you're going to listen to a short lecture. And again, you'll have 11 questions. First, you'll have 2.5 minutes to preview the questions, and you'll have the 3 minutes afterwards. Okay, so make good use of this time before and after the lecture. It could make the difference in your score. You really want to know what you're going to be asked. Chances are that the questions will be given in the order that the information is presented in the listening, and that goes for the reading as well. Now remember, it's not a golden rule, because sometimes there could be a general meaning question, sometimes there could be an inference question, and those don't come in a particular order. Okay, so here's what a question could look like from the short lecture. And here you're in your preparation time. So you've got how many? 2.5 minutes to flip through all of the 5 screens and have a look at what you're going to be listening for. And finally, we get to the last short lecture, which is in part 5, and it's exactly the same pattern. So you start with 2.5 minutes to look at the questions, then you work through your 11 questions, then you review your work in the 3 minutes after. Here's a quick peek at what that could look like. And here we're in the prep time, we're not listening. Okay, so let's review listening and then we'll move on to writing. So for listening, the skills are the same categories as we saw for reading. So general meaning, specific information, and inference. And these are the same points that we talked about for reading. Are there questions about this? And Ahmad, the questions for listening are pretty much in the order that you'll hear the information in the lecture. It's not 100% exactly, but is very, very close. It depends on the type of question you get. Now, the listening question types are identical to what we saw for reading. So remember, the multiple choice answer, multiple answer, be careful with those. And you should be familiar with all these others. What about listening strategies? Well, these are quite different from what we saw. Well, one is similar, but most aren't. So for previewing, you're going to use that pre-listening time to review your questions and also try to be aware of what kind of question it is. So is it general meaning? Is it specific information? Are you inferring? As you read through the questions, try to identify some keywords because those may help you hear answers as you're listening later on. So after the audio has played, you're going to do some reviewing. Make sure you check your answers, and most importantly, be sure that there's an answer for every question. There is no penalty for guessing a wrong answer. So if you have no idea what the answer should be, click on anything. For note-taking, so this is something you should experiment with at home for quite a while before the test. You may want to take notes while you're listening, but on the other hand, that could distract you from answering the questions. So you need to experiment with this and see what works best for you, and also consider those time constraints. And this one you should be familiar with from reading. So if you do hear words that you're unfamiliar with, if you don't need to know what they mean, don't even think about them. If they're key to answering a question, then just keep listening to the sentence and see if you can guess what that word could mean. Chances are you can make a pretty good guess. Okay, let's look at the writing tasks. So there's one at the end of part 4, one at the end of part 5. Remember, each writing task is about the reading and or the lecture that you've just done in each section. Okay, so now for the long writing, you're going to be doing a minimum of 250 words. You will have 35 minutes. Now, this essay type question is going to relate to both the reading and the lecture. So you'll be expected to draw information from both of those sources. And then because it is very much like an essay, you'll be expected to structure your response in that way. However, the short writing is quite different. So this one is a minimum of 100 words. You only have 10 minutes to write, so chances are you won't be able to write much more than that. And it'll relate to the reading or the lecture. So you're only going to have to worry about one of those things. And it will be a short summary of one of those things. So let's look at the long writing. You're told that your professor asks you a question and you're going to write an answer on the next page. Use the information from the reading and the lecture. Answer the question in your own words. This is key, all right? You don't want to draw phrases from the reading in the lecture. Write at least 250 words. Now, if you write more than that, that is fine. Just make sure you're doing as good a job as you can. And remember, you have 35 minutes, so you want to be finished the piece when that time is up. Okay, so right now we're looking at the question page, and you have more instructions on the left side. So you're told that you can use the reading and the lecture notes tabs to look at those sources. You're reminded that you should not copy directly, and you're also reminded that you can highlight the text, word count. Now, in terms of evaluation, the content and structure of your response, the accuracy of your language, and your use of the source material. Okay, so there's a lot of things there to keep in mind. The question is a little complex. Should scientists go back and reanalyze established conclusions and facts? Should we spend time on new questions and new research instead? Explain your position, build an argument, and provide support. So you can see that you're given two different positions on the topic. You're asked to choose one, explain why you chose it by building an argument with really strong support. Have a quick look at the editing tools that are available to you, and you can practice using these with our free online sample tests. So you can play around with your text, bold, italics, underline, but don't go too crazy because you want to be easy on the eyes of the examiner or the rater. And then you've got cut, delete, copy, undo, and redo. And here's your automatic word count. Everyone with me? Okay, we'll look at, we're still on the long writing. I wanted to show you the other tabs. So the reading, so when you click on the reading tab, it's exactly as we saw before for speaking. The reading comes up, you can highlight things, and then you can also access the lecture notes as well. Someone has asked if the writing part of the test includes a spell check function. I think that's basically what this means. Does it spot typos? And the answer is no, it does not. Because this is an academic test, you're expected to manage your spelling as well as you can. So you can also access the lecture notes in this way. Okay, so let's look at the final task on the test, which is the short writing. And so you have a very similar page of instructions. Here you're told to use information from the reading or the lecture. So it's up to you to choose whichever one you would like. And then to write 100 words, and you have 10 minutes to complete the task. So let's have a look. So you can see that you're again provided with the reading and the lecture notes. All of this information is exactly what we saw for the long response, except for the word count, which is 100 words. And the question is much simpler because you have far less time and a much shorter word count. What are some features and characteristics that distinguish different planets? So it sounds as if the reading and or the lecture will have summarized that information, and it will be up to you to go in there and summarize it in, in a summary form for us. Okay, so here's what the reading page would look like and the lecture notes. So somebody has asked if they can use both the lecture notes and the reading passage in the short writing, and you have been asked to use one or the other. So my best advice to you is to follow the instructions that the test has given you. Okay, the long writing is an essay. It is 250 words. It asks for a great deal of information. The short writing is a summary of shorter, something a little shorter perhaps, and you're not providing your opinion, you're not proving why what you think is a better choice. So it is quite different. Okay, so to summarize for writing, let's look at some key writing skills. And so I'm going to go through these quickly with you. So try to minimize spelling, grammar, and punctuation errors. So if you're concerned about any of these areas, get yourself a good book or a tutor or take an academic writing course and brush up on these things. It would be very helpful if you could include transitions to link ideas, especially in the long writing. It's not as critical for the shorter piece. Select vocabulary that's suitable for the topic, and you'll have a great deal of vocabulary provided to you in the reading or the lecture. Of course, whenever you're repeating ideas, rephrase them. When you're using information from sources, oh yes, well this is basically what we just talked about. Restate them again in your own words. And it would also be ideal if you could use a variety of sentence types and lengths. Okay, so if you could, for example, have a combination of simple, compound, complex, and even compound complex sentences, and this in turn would give you a combination of shorter and longer sentences. This is best. In terms of typing speed, I wouldn't worry too much about that because you have a fair bit of time to type. 35 minutes is quite a long time. Now, if you're concerned about your typing speed, then give yourself some time before your test date to practice every day. You don't have to be a fast typer at all. You don't have to be a fast typist. You just need to be able to type fast enough to put your words together. You know, a fast speed is really not critical to being able to turn in a good piece of writing. So for writing strategies, we've divided this into 3 sections: previewing, writing, and reviewing. Okay, so for pre-writing, this is similar to what you were doing in speaking. So take a few minutes to brainstorm ideas, collect information from your sources, review the passage in the lecture notes, and you could even create an outline, especially for the essay. I wouldn't bother with an outline for the short writing. Now it's up to you to manage your time, so you get to decide how long you want to spend before you actually start typing your response. Remember, you are provided with a pen and or a pencil and some paper, so you can actually draft up a quick outline if you want to and jot your ideas down. But don't spend too much time on this. I would say not more than 7 or 8 minutes tops. For the writing part of your time, start with an introduction statement. Make sure you stay on topic. Clearly state your position. Include supporting information from sources, and develop your response. Finally, leave a few minutes at the end because you can always make your work better. So watch that clock, leave at least 3 minutes and maybe 5, depending on your writing. And then when you're finished, when you decided you're ready to check your work, close your eyes for a minute, take a breath, open your eyes, imagine that you are a CAEL CE rater and read through your response very carefully, looking for spelling, grammar, punctuation, sentence structure, and formatting problems, and try to fix any that you see. Okay, so that concludes our tour of the test. I just have a couple more slides to share with you. So in terms of test scores, our bands, if you're familiar with the CAEL assessment bands, this is identical. What I want to point out to you is that most colleges and universities are looking for a CAEL 70. Now, some will accept a 60, but I know the majority are looking for a 70. Be sure to check with your college or university, and especially with the faculty or the department that you're planning to go to. You want to check that A, they accept CAEL CE, and B, find out exactly what score you'll need to get to be accepted, and then you can work towards that score. Just for your interest, the reading and listening parts of the test are scored by the computer, and the speaking and writing are scored by our trained and certified CAEL CE raters. They go through quite a complicated training process, and you will have different individuals rating each part of your test, and more than one doing each one. So there will be a few different people involved in putting your score together. Are there any questions about the test? I do have a couple more slides just to show you what's available to help you get ready for the test. What score is accepted by ICCRC? Good question, Mohammed. I believe it's a 70. Do you know, Katrina? And, oh, Dalpat, do you know that for sure? Okay, thank you. And if anybody wants to double check, I would suggest that you contact ICCRC directly. It is possible they could change that requirement at any time. We may not even be aware of it because we don't set those things. Okay, keep the questions coming. I'm just going to quickly show you these study materials, and then I'll come back to take more questions. Okay, so because CAEL CE is a brand new test, we're still very busy putting together some products for you to help you get ready. So we're going to have a lot more things coming out in the coming months. To begin with, we have three things to offer you. Now, the first one is our free sample test, which is available on this website. So you can just go to the CAEL.ca website, and you should easily be able to access the test there. I can't stress how important it is for each of you to go through the whole sample test in full before you come to an official test sitting. In fact, you need to have a timer and force yourself to stick with the times that are given so that you understand what is required. Thank you, Juliana. Really appreciate that. Now, we also have for you a complete online practice test. So this is a product you can purchase, and I'll be telling you in a moment about a special offer we have for this. So in this product, you get one complete practice test. For reading and listening, you're given an answer key with an analysis of each answer, explaining why it's right. And for speaking, there is a record and playback feature, so you can record your voice and play it back later and try to determine your strengths and weaknesses. And same with your writing. Your responses will be saved for that as well. And finally, the other product we have available right now is the Academic Vocabulary Builder. So this is an online study program. It's got 5 topics of vocabulary items and lots of things like videos, quizzes, flashcards, puzzles, lists, and you can use this on your tablet and phone so you can improve your vocabulary as you're commuting as well. Okay, special offers that I promised you. So we have the free CAEL CE practice test. So normally, or in a few months, this will be available at a fee, and I'm not sure what that fee will be, but until September 15th, you can get it for free. So make sure you go to our website, use this code, CEFREE, and you will be able to get it for free. Okay? Don't miss that offer. Now, the CAEL CE will be running at a price of $265. However, between now and the end of this year, you will be able to get it at $40 off, so you can buy this test for $225. So that is a pretty sweet deal. However, if you happen to fit the requirements, and if you are based in Vancouver or Toronto, then you can actually get a free CAEL CE, not free, but 50% off, which is really wonderful, by taking the CAEL CE pretest, which is free, and which would also give you a tremendous practice opportunity. If you're interested in doing this, you need to be in Vancouver or Toronto. You also need to be of a certain age, and you need to be in some kind of a program. So you need to carefully check the requirements on the website here to find out if you're eligible. Okay. A couple of websites for you up here. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and check our website regularly for updates. As I said, our very first CAEL CE test sitting is coming up on let's see, September 15th. So we're very, very excited about that. Okay, are there any questions before we wrap up? I'm a bit over time. I apologize for that. If there are any questions, I have time to take a couple, but it looks like we're good. I see Juliana has told us that the practice test will be $25 once that free offer is over. Okay, can you challenge the score if you believe that it is not right, asks Juan. Yeah, so if you want to have a reassessment on your test score, you will be able to do that. Juliana, I don't know what the details are on that. I know a fee would be involved, and you would have to do it within a certain time frame. I'm not sure if this information is posted yet on our website, but if it's not, it will be there soon. Any other questions? Oh, thanks, Juliana. So Juan, check our website, look under the test takers section, and you should be able to find the information there. All right, everyone, I'm sorry I've kept you late. I want to wrap up so you can all get on with your day. So if there are no more questions, oh, here's one more. For practice test, how does the recording and playback work? That will all be clearly explained in the practice test, David. It should be very straightforward and simple. I don't believe that you'll find it hard to figure out at all. Okay? All right. Thank you, everyone. To those of you who are thinking of taking the CAEL test, I do encourage you to give it a try, and I wish you the best of luck with the test.